The silence before the storm. The war room deep beneath Geneva hummed with quiet tension. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the holographic display, her fingers tracing invisible patterns across the star chart floating in the air. Around her, military commanders from every nation on Earth watched in silence. The room smelled of recycled air and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Outside, the world continued its daily routine, unaware that humanity's fate hung in the balance. The alien fleet had arrived 3 days ago. Massive ships, each the size of a city, now orbited Jupiter. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly metal that seemed to shift colors in the starlight. The creatures inside called themselves the Cauldron Dominion. They had sent one message, brief and cold. Earth would surrender its resources, or face extinction. They gave humanity 48 hours to decide. That deadline had passed 6 hours ago. Chen turned to face her team. Her dark eyes showed no fear, only calculation. She had spent 30 years in the Space Defense Initiative, climbing from a fighter pilot to the highest command. She had prepared for this moment, though she had hoped it would never come. The politicians wanted to negotiate. The corporations wanted to comply. But Chen knew the truth. Surrender meant slavery. Compliance meant death, just slower. Colonel James Morrison stepped forward. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from a dozen classified missions. "Admiral, the Cauldron are scanning our cities. They're cataloging our population centers, our factories, our military bases. They think we're going to roll over." His voice carried a hint of anger mixed with something else. Anticipation. Chen nodded slowly. "Let them think that. How long until our assets are in position?" A young technician named Wei Lin checked her console. Her hands moved quickly across the haptic interface, pulling up data streams from satellites hidden throughout the solar system. 12 hours, Admiral. The outer platforms are ready. The belt stations have armed their payloads. Mars base confirms all systems operational. We're just waiting for your order. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what that order would mean. For decades, humanity had built in secret. While the world argued about climate change and economic policy, while nations bickered over borders and trade, the Space Defense Initiative had been constructing something far greater. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt. Weapon platforms disguised as mining operations. Fleets of warships that existed only in classified files. Chen had overseen much of this construction herself. She remembered the first time she saw the shipyards, floating in the darkness beyond Mars. Thousands of vessels, each designed for one purpose. To defend Earth against threats the public didn't know existed. The governments of Earth had agreed to this in secret, pooling resources and technology. It was the greatest cooperative effort in human history, and absolutely no one could know about it. "Admiral," Morrison said quietly, "if we do this, there's no going back. The Cauldron won't negotiate after we show our hand." Chen met his gaze. "They were never going to negotiate, Colonel. Their message was clear. Submit or die. They've done this to 17 other species. We've intercepted their communications. We've studied their tactics. They don't negotiate with those they consider beneath them. And they consider everyone beneath them." She turned back to the holographic display. With a gesture, she zoomed out, showing the entire solar system. Red markers indicated the Cauldron fleet near Jupiter. Blue markers, thousands of them, appeared throughout the system. Each one represented a human vessel or weapons platform. The aliens didn't know about any of them. They had scanned Earth's surface, seen the small orbital stations, the handful of ships near the planet. They had concluded, as Chen had hoped they would, that humanity was primitive and weak. "They're moving," Wei Lin said suddenly. Her voice remained calm, but her fingers tensed on the console. "For Cauldron dreadnoughts are breaking formation. They're heading toward Earth. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Chen felt her heart rate increase slightly, but her face showed nothing. This was it. The moment that would define humanity's future. She thought of her daughter, safe in a bunker in Colorado. She thought of the billions of people on Earth who trusted their leaders to protect them. She thought of all the humans who had worked in secret for decades, building and planning for this day. Send the activation codes, Chen said quietly. Wake them all up. Morrison moved to a secure terminal. He entered a series of commands, then paused with his finger over the final key. Admiral, this is your last chance to change your mind. Chen smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Colonel, humanity has been mocked, underestimated, and threatened for the last time. The Cauldron think we're primitives because we haven't conquered other worlds. They think we're weak because we fight among ourselves. They don't understand that every war we've fought has made us stronger. Every conflict has taught us something new. We've been warriors since we lived in caves. We've been survivors since before we had language. And now we're going to teach the galaxy a lesson. Morrison pressed the key. Throughout the solar system, dormant ships came to life. In the asteroid belt, massive carriers opened their bays, releasing swarms of fighters. On Mars, weapons platforms that had pretended to be research stations activated their targeting systems. Near Venus, hidden in the solar winds, destroyers powered up their engines. In the Kuiper belt, battleships that had been disguised as ice formations began moving toward the inner system. And near Earth, in orbit on the far side of the moon, something massive stirred. The flagship of humanity's secret fleet, a vessel 3 kilometers long, bristled with weapons that could crack a planet. It had been built over 20 years, assembled from parts manufactured in a dozen different countries. It was called the Defiance, and it had been waiting for this moment. Chen watched the display as blue markers began moving, converging on Jupiter. 10,000 ships, each crewed by volunteers who had trained in secret. Pilots who had flown simulations of alien combat for years. Engineers who had designed weapons based on captured technology. Soldiers who had been told they might never see action, but who had prepared anyway. The Cauldron are detecting our ships, Wei Lin reported. They're hailing us. They sound confused. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Put them through. The holographic display shifted, showing the face of a Cauldron commander. The alien had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin that looked like polished stone, and a mouth full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. It spoke in a harsh, clicking language that the computer translated instantly. What is this? How do you primitives possess such a fleet? This is impossible. Our scouts reported you had nothing beyond your planet. Chen stepped forward, making sure the alien could see her clearly. Your scouts saw what we wanted them to see. You made the mistake of judging us by your own standards. You assumed that because we haven't conquered other species, we must be weak. You were wrong. The alien's eyes widened. You cannot defeat the Cauldron Dominion. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. We are the masters of this galaxy. Chen's expression hardened. You were. Past tense. Because today, humanity teaches you a new lesson. We don't conquer other worlds because we don't want to. We fight among ourselves because that's how we grow stronger. And when something threatens our home, when something threatens our children, we become something you've never faced before. We become united. We become unstoppable. We become the thing that monsters fear in the dark. She gestured to Morrison, who cut the transmission. The Cauldron commander's shocked face vanished from the display. Chen turned to address her team. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. You know your targets. You know your orders. Remember what we're fighting for. Not for glory. Not for conquest. For home. For family. For the right to exist without fear. Show the galaxy what humanity can do when we stand together. Show them why our legends are real. Throughout the solar system, 10,000 human ships surged forward. The greatest armada ever assembled moved as one, heading toward the Cauldron fleet at Jupiter. The aliens scrambled to respond, but their confusion was evident. They had expected an easy victory, a quick subjugation of another primitive species. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered. A species that had prepared for war while pretending to be helpless. A species that had turned deception into an art form. Chen watched the tactical display as her ships closed the distance. The first engagement would begin in less than an hour. She thought about all the people who had made this possible. The scientists who had reverse-engineered alien technology from crashed probes. The diplomats who had kept the secret for decades. The workers who had built ships in the darkness of space, never asking questions, trusting that their leaders had good reasons. "Admiral," Morrison said softly, "whatever happens today, humanity will never be the same." Chen nodded. "That's the point, Colonel. The galaxy has mocked us for the last time. After today, they'll know the truth. Humans don't just survive. We thrive. We adapt. We overcome. And we never, ever forgive those who threaten our home." When thunder breaks. The first human fighters reached Jupiter's orbit exactly 53 minutes after Admiral Chen gave the order. They came in fast, their engines burning hot as they accelerated past the massive gas giant. The Cauldron fleet had scrambled into a defensive formation, their dreadnoughts forming a wall while smaller cruisers moved to intercept. But the aliens were still confused, still trying to understand how this primitive species had hidden such military might. Captain Marcus Reed commanded Fighter Squadron Gamma, 12 craft moving in perfect synchronization through the void. He had been a test pilot before being recruited into the Black program 15 years ago. Since then, he had flown more combat simulations against alien vessels than any other human. Now those simulations were about to become reality. "All craft, maintain formation," Reed transmitted. His hands were steady on the controls. "Remember, their shields are strongest at the front. Hit them from angles they don't expect. Make them turn, make them react. We're faster than they are." The Cauldron fired first. Beams of superheated plasma lanced through space, bright enough to hurt the eyes even through filtered displays. 3 of Reed's fighters rolled aside, the attacks missing by meters. The pilots had spent years learning to anticipate alien weapons, studying every piece of data the SDI had collected. They knew how Cauldron gunners thought, how they aimed, how they tracked targets. Reed's fighter weaved through the incoming fire like a dancer, his movements fluid and practiced. He locked onto a Cauldron cruiser, waited for the targeting computer to achieve a solid lock, then fired. The missile streaked forward, its warhead designed specifically to penetrate alien shields. It struck the cruiser's side, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the shield flickered, failed, and the explosion tore through the hull. "Confirmed kill," Reed said calmly. "They're not invincible. All squadrons, weapons free. Show them what we can do." Throughout the battle space, human fighters engaged the Cauldron fleet. The aliens had superior firepower, but the humans had speed and tactics. Every pilot had trained for this moment. Every maneuver had been practiced thousands of times. They worked together with a precision that shocked the Cauldron commanders. On the bridge of the Cauldron flagship, Commander Zethus stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His 4 eyes tracked the battle, watching as his forces struggled against the unexpected onslaught. How had this happened? The humans were supposed to be weak, divided, technologically backward. Yet their fighters moved with skill that rivaled the best pilots in the Dominion. Their weapons, though smaller, were devastatingly effective. "All dreadnoughts, focus fire on their capital ships," Zethus ordered. "Ignore the fighters. Destroy their command vessels." But before his ships could execute the order, something massive appeared on the sensors. The display showed a vessel emerging from behind Jupiter's moon Io. It was enormous, dwarfing even the Cauldron dreadnoughts. The hull was dark gray, covered in weapons ports and armor plating. At the bow, painted in letters 300 meters tall, was a single word in human script: Defiance. Aboard the Defiance, Vice Admiral Thomas Okonkwo watched the Cauldron fleet with satisfaction. He was a veteran of 3 decades in the Navy, a tactician who had studied every major battle in human history. He had helped design the Defiance, had overseen the installation of every weapon system, every defensive measure. Now it was time to put all that planning to the test. All batteries, target the flagship, Okonkwo commanded. Let's introduce ourselves properly. The Defiance's main guns fired. Each projectile was the size of a bus, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed by magnetic rails. They struck the Cauldron flagship's shields with such force that the entire ship rocked backward. The shields held, but barely. Alarms blared throughout the alien vessel as damage reports flooded in. Zethus grabbed his command chair as the ship shuddered. Return fire. All weapons, target that vessel. But the Cauldron response was too slow. The Defiance had already rotated, bringing different weapons to bear. Laser batteries that could boil away armor in seconds. Missile pods that released hundreds of smart munitions. Point defense systems that shot down incoming fire with inhuman accuracy. The human flagship had been designed by people who had studied every weakness in alien technology, every flaw in Cauldron tactics. More human ships entered the battle. Destroyers and cruisers, each bearing the flags of different nations but all working together with seamless coordination. They had practiced this ballet of destruction for years in simulators, and now they executed it perfectly. The Cauldron fleet, so confident an hour ago, found itself fighting for survival. Back on Earth, in the Geneva Command Center, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with intense focus. Blue markers swarmed around red ones, the battle unfolding exactly as the simulations had predicted. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Cauldron had more fleets, more ships. This battle would send a message, but it wouldn't end the war. Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from other alien species, Wei Lin reported. They're monitoring the battle. Some are demanding explanations. Others are requesting diplomatic channels. Chen smiled coldly. The galaxy is watching. Good. Let them see what happens when you threaten humanity. Let them see that we're not the primitives they thought we were. Colonel Morrison leaned closer. Several alien ambassadors are requesting immediate meetings. They seem alarmed. They should be alarmed, Chen said. For decades, they've assumed we were irrelevant because we stayed in our own system. They thought we were weak because we didn't conquer our neighbors. They mistook restraint for inability. Now they're learning the truth. Humans don't need to conquer other worlds. We just need to protect our own. Near Jupiter, the battle reached its crescendo. Captain Reed's squadron had lost 3 fighters, but they had destroyed 7 Cauldron cruisers. The Defiance had crippled the enemy flagship, forcing Zethus to transfer his command to a backup vessel. Across the battle space, human ships pressed their advantage, their crews working with the discipline and coordination that came from years of secret training. Zethus realized with growing horror that his fleet was losing. The humans had more ships than his scouts had reported. Much more. And they were better trained, better coordinated, more determined. He made a decision that went against every instinct in his warrior culture. He ordered a retreat. All ships, fall back to the outer system, Zethus transmitted. We need reinforcements. We need to regroup. But Admiral Chen had anticipated this. She had positioned battle groups throughout the outer solar system, waiting for exactly this moment. As the Cauldron fleet tried to retreat, they found human ships blocking every escape route. They were surrounded, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Okonkwo opened a channel to the alien commander. Cauldron vessels, this is the Defiance. You have 2 choices. Surrender immediately, or we continue this fight until your fleet is destroyed. Choose now. Zethus looked around his bridge. His crew stared at him, waiting for orders. He thought of the Dominion's proud history, of the hundreds of worlds they had conquered. But he also thought of his crew, of the thousands of Cauldron soldiers who would die if this battle continued. He had never surrendered before. His species considered surrender to be the ultimate dishonor. But he also valued survival. And right now, survival meant admitting defeat. "We surrender," Zethus said, his voice heavy with shame. "We will power down our weapons." Throughout the solar system, the human fleet held its fire. 10,000 warships surrounded the battered Cauldron forces, ready to resume combat at the slightest provocation. But the aliens complied. One by one, their ships went dark, weapons offline, shields down. In Geneva, Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of relief. The first battle was won. Humanity had proven itself. But she knew this was far from over. The Cauldron Dominion was vast, powerful, with resources beyond imagination. This defeat would anger them. They would come back with more ships, more weapons, more determination. But they would also come back with fear. Fear of the species they had underestimated. Fear of the humans who had turned deception into a strategic advantage. Fear of the people who had built an armada in secret and used it to devastating effect. Chen opened a channel to every human ship in the system. "All personnel, this is Admiral Chen. Today you have done something incredible. You have shown the galaxy that humanity will not be intimidated. You have proven that we can stand against any threat. But this is just the beginning. The Cauldron will return. Other species will test us. We must remain vigilant, remain united, remain ready." She paused, looking at the faces of her command staff. They were tired, stressed, but also proud. They had been part of something historic. "The age of humanity being mocked is over," Chen continued. "From this day forward, the galaxy will know the truth. We are not primitives. We are not weak. We are survivors, warriors, and protectors of our home. And anyone who threatens Earth will face the full might of united humanity. That is our promise. That is our legacy." Throughout the fleet, thousands of voices erupted in cheers. On ships scattered across the solar system, crews celebrated their victory. On Earth, in secure bunkers and command centers, people who had kept this secret for decades finally saw their work validated. But Admiral Chen didn't celebrate. She stood before the tactical display, already planning for the next battle, the next threat, the next challenge. Because she knew the truth that the rest of humanity would soon learn. The galaxy had changed forever.